Well, despite the pandemic, police officers are among those who have had to continue going to work every day.
Back in May, MPD estimated officers responded to 500 COVID-positive locations every week. And now CBS 58 Investigates has new data showing how many Milwaukee officers contracted the virus.
A lot of us are able to work from home and limit our risks of contracting COVID-19, but police officers don't have that choice. In some lines of work, social distancing isn't an option.
We go where the calls for service are, and if someone has committed a crime, we go investigate. The suspect says, I'm COVID positive. We don't get to say, oh, well then you don't have to go to jail today.
Throughout the pandemic, Milwaukee police officers faced a record number of homicides and large protests against police brutality.
Our rules were not the same as yours or other civilians that didn't have to go to work every day. You work until you have symptoms or you know you have it or you've had close contact.
In May, MPD reported 36 people had contracted COVID-19. Now, nearly a year into the pandemic, 84 civilian employees and 475 sworn officers, more than a quarter of the department, have tested positive.
I don't think 475 is outrageous or small. I think it's to be expected.
Across the country, COVID-19 was the leading cause of line-of-duty deaths. According to Officer Down Memorial Page, a nonprofit that tracks police deaths, 219 officers died of COVID-19 in 2020. Fortunately, all MPD officers survived the virus, but the president of the Milwaukee Police Association says a few MPD officers did have severe cases.
We did have a couple officers that were touch and go.
Doctors still don't know much about the long-term consequences of COVID-19 or how it could impact people with physically demanding jobs.
There's at least some percent of people who are going to get this inflammatory process that attacks your lungs, it attacks your heart, and it's going to decrease your ability to exert yourself.
Inspector Waldner says some officers recovering from COVID couldn't go back on the street immediately.
If officers come back but they're not street ready, we still have officers that had lingering effects that just had to work in the office for a little bit until they felt good.
On top of the officers out with COVID, nearly 900 MPD employees had to quarantine for 2 weeks due to an exposure.
As an officer, is out on COVID, that requires other officers to step up and take the workload that officer who was out dealt with.
There have been outbreaks in the telecommunications department and District 5. Inspector Waldner says while some areas were hit with cases, it never became unmanageable.
A few people get it at a work location, and then other members get it, usually the partners, but then it's contained.
And despite the risks, Inspector Waldner says throughout the pandemic, officers kept going, and that's what they will continue to do.
It's just not a choice. You just take all the precautions, and we've been pretty lucky.
Officers started getting the vaccine a few weeks ago, and they will continue to wear masks. Inspector Waldner says despite a shortage at the beginning of the pandemic, they do now have enough PPE. Reporting in Milwaukee, Kristen Barbarisi, CBS 58 Investigates.